All right, folks, welcome back to the Land Fixer podcast. Today we have Clay Hepler, and he is going to tell us all about why land is the asset class and why he is deploying a bunch of his own capital into it. Before we get started, as usual, if you are looking to get into investing in land, I have a bunch of resources, or I point you in a bunch of directions to get started. If you're looking to fund a flip, go ahead and reach out to me at my funding company, landpartnerfunding.com. We fund land flips, developments, all sorts of cool stuff. If you're a land flipper already, you're looking to market and sell your land, go to primelandexchange.com. Or if you are looking to buy land as an asset class, which many of you are, that's the best place to go. Go to primelandexchange.com, check out our inventory. It's always changing, growing, shrinking, and we only have the best deals on there. Okay. So, with that being said, let's just get right into it. Clay, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? What brought you to land and how you got here today? All that sort of stuff.
So I feel like, have you ever met someone that was like a religious convert and they're like, my life before this was so different. I feel that same way about land. In fact, before I got off this call, I'm selling an 8-unit apartment building that I own. Now, does that mean that I hate commercial real estate? I hate residential real estate? No. I just know that my dollars at this point can just work a little bit harder, much harder than land. So my background isn't land. I'm not a guy that came to the business and was land first, like a lot of people that are in the land flipping, land investment business. My background was first in wholesaling and house flipping.
Mhm.
But even before that, man, I was in the chocolate business, luxury chocolate business. So we sold to private aviation groups, wealth advisors, high net worth wealth advisors, the Omni hotel chain on the East Coast. And we were in 42 states. We started in 2 states when I was there. And when I left, we were in 42 states working with small specialty shops, right? Like Whole Foods, but like small specialty shops. So I got into real estate after that because I was like, hey, I want to forge my own path. I want to learn about real estate. I joined a mom and pop in my city and learn, like, cut my teeth doing smaller multifamily stuff. This guy had a couple hundred units and all residential stuff, all, built in 1900, 1890, old buildings. So I scaled a wholesaling house flipping company with him. He basically placed the capital. He was the capital guy, and I built and scaled the business. We did 75 deals in our first year and kind of took off from there. Shortly after that, I got into, the BRRRR craze, right? I learned about real estate through Bigger Pockets and got into the BRRRR craze and bought 65 smaller multifamily properties, duplexes, triplexes, 6-unit, 8-unit, 10 units in a year. So I was really moving quickly. Interest rates were pretty low and I looked like a genius. I mean, I was like, wow, dude, like I'm awesome. And I was wholesaling, flipping bigger buildings. Like I wholesaled a 28 unit, multiple 6-figure payday, wholesaling some other larger apartment buildings. And then my world changed. A couple years ago, the day before Thanksgiving, my wife, by the way, I have to say all this, like I'm saying this is great, right? I'm buying these buildings, but I'm out there, like I left the company, right? I went out and did my own thing very amicably, but I was like, hey, I'm going to go do this. I can easily do this, right? I can pull out the equity through refinancing and everything is going to be okay. My wife had a 6-figure job though. So like, you said, oh, this guy's super successful, and people make themselves seem more successful when they talk. But when you look at the numbers, it's much different. So she had a 6-figure job, man. And we were coasting off. We got some cash flow from this, but all of a sudden these buildings are built in 1900. Okay. So when you get a roof or a terracotta sewer line that's on the side of a hill, because the city that I invest in, there's a lot of hills, you got to spend $30,000. That cash flow that you think is there, right? Even if you hear like the Bigger Pocket stuff, which is you get $100 per unit, dude, that's $6,500 per month in cash flow and net cash flow, right? So we're talking about why land. Well, I saw this really quickly that this was not going to pay for my life. So my wife gave me that call a couple of years ago, the day before Thanksgiving. Her company went under. And so I had to scramble to figure out a way to produce cash quickly. And I had the background in wholesaling and house flipping, but I saw land. I learned about land. I was flirting with it. And I was like, dude, I can come into this business. There's no one talking about this in RIAs. There's no one talking about this really outwardly. And even the podcasts in the space now, compared to wholesaling and house flipping, they're like peanuts. Very few people know about land still. And so I got into it and haven't looked back. I mean, I love it because of a variety of different reasons. Like number one reason why I really love land is the low competition relative to the house flipping space. That's where my background is. And, we did really well, but the competition there is just so much more because anyone and their mother can get on a cold calling, house flipping, their local houses, driving for dollars, and everyone gets the same lists. And it's so competitive, right? You can still make a ton of money in that space, though. So I like it because it's lower competition. I like it because there's multiple exit strategies. We can owner finance this land, we can lease it, you can rent it out. There's so many different things that we can do. There's low carrying costs. That's another reason why I love it. Relative, if we're flipping a house, we got to worry about the carrying costs of mortgages, debt, insurance, taxes, utilities. There's so many other things that we have to consider. So there's a couple of things that it's like, dude, like it's so different. It's so much less of a headache. So I'm kind of blabbering a little bit. But I that's kind of where I came into the land space and why I really like it a lot.
No, that's perfect. It reminds me a lot of my partner Ryan in our funding company. He's similar. He'd done, I guess, hundreds of house flips, and now he owns a bunch of, rental homes. I think a couple apartment complexes, stuff like that. And he can't get away from it fast enough. And now he's kind of looking at all these, units that he owns as handcuffs. He's like, well, if I go through and try to sell them all in a year or something like that, it's going to have all these crazy tax implications. And he's too fiscally responsible to do that. So now he's like, well, I have to sell them one at a time. And if I'm selling them one at a time, I'm going to be selling these things when I'm 80 or 90. And in the meantime, what is he? He's a property manager. Now he's like, yes, he's wealthy. It's served him. It's all this great stuff, but now he's just a full-time property manager. And, when he was coming into the space, it was very similar. He was like, I'm sick of this. I want to get into land. I want to figure it out. When we met each other, I kind of coached him up on the land space. And now he's like, it's really not easy to compare, especially when you look at like what are worst case scenarios. Have you had any sort of, crises in the single family rental business or multifamily business and how expensive they were?
Oh man, I mean, where do I even start? I'm dealing with one now, and it's going to cost me multiple, getting sued from tenants, for really stupid shit, right? Like getting sued because of I'm not going to go into it because I can't really talk about it, but
Yeah.
just stuff that you shake your head and you're like, what? So that you have more legal exposure, and then other stuff pertaining to habitability of apartment building units from boroughs that are much more stringent, everything, and just shelling out money. I mean, just shelling out money. And it's not this in land, it's so different. The reason why I think people are attracted to commercial real estate is there's this really clear tax benefit, right? And so if we make a decision based on a tax benefit, we think it's so sexy. Like I can reduce my taxes, I can depreciate it, but there is so much other stuff that is involved in the management of the real estate. And buying it right is just the first part. That's like 10% of it. You have to manage it right. You have to property manage it and asset manage it right. You have to be very, very thoughtful on like making sure all taxes are paid at certain times and making sure that you manage your tenants properly. So in my experience, like land is up because of the things that I talked about earlier, and also just the headache, the return on hassle. It's so much of a better investment vehicle in order to produce cash.
Yeah. And not only produce cash, like a lot of the people that I talk to on a regular basis, they're looking for something that's going to make some money, but mostly like what's a safe place to put money. I think you and I are both very active real estate investors, so we're always thinking like, oh, I could squeeze a lot out of this, right? But I think there's a lot of people who are like, especially in these wild political times and these wild economic times, they might be sitting with, say, $100,000, in a savings account or, whatever. And they're looking at what it's accruing, and it's, 4%, 5%, 6%, 7%, something very modest. And if it's linked to the stock market, there's this potential for pretty wild volatility. So then you hear about people who are saying, well, you need to go buy gold or more stable assets. and it gets finicky. The more you get into these detailed investments, I get really concerned when I'm looking at anything now. But I look at land as an asset class, and I'm like, there's nothing that is more foundation, right?
Mm.
This has been fought over and clawed away from one another. Humans have been in constant pursuit of land literally forever. As soon as we thought of the idea of ownership, I'm sure the first thing we owned was territory, right? So there's nothing that seems more safe and more simple than land, in my opinion. So even if you're able to buy land from a wholesaler right now at like 80, 85%, you can just sit and hold that for a few years and land bank on it. And that's what I think a lot of my clients are coming to me now who are making repeat purchases. That's what they want. There's like, let me put my money into something that's safe and I know is going to have steady appreciation. And a lot of the time, if you're buying smart, you can buy a product that you can do forced appreciation on. So right now it's a 40-acre field, but in the future you could divide it into 4 10-acre parcels, right? Or, whatever. There's ways where you can take a basic piece of land and add value to it. So I don't know. What do you think? Do you put your long-term money into land, or is it just your short-term flip money?
Well, to be fair, I have not started the land banking process because I am in the accumulation stage.
Mhm.
So that is in when accumulation, I mean I'm trying to build a lot of cash flow quickly. And some of the mistakes that I made in the in my multifamily business have cost me, right? And thankfully I have a really successful land flipping business, but like if you have to shell out multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars over a short period of time, like I made some poor mistakes, right? I made a poor mistake on buying, a Airbnb in Colorado, and I've learned from these mistakes. But I'm not at the point that I will be land banking, but I will absolutely do that in the future, right? So I think it's one of the best ways if you buy correctly to build generational wealth, right? We talk about a lot of the multifamily syndicators and other commercial syndicators talk about the generational wealth through these deals, right? Really, what they're doing is they're flipping apartment buildings, right? You're not really holding on to apartment buildings. Imagine if you had the ability to force the same amount of appreciation, but you don't have the problems of dealing with tenants, termites, or toilets. It's actually truly a passive piece of real estate. So when you talk about the risk adjusted returns of that, the risk adjusted returns of land is, dude, you walk out on a 40-acre tract, what's going to go on? There's, I mean, there's so much more security in that relative to a commercial asset or something like that. So I think long term, I'm going to have a lot of my cash just sitting in prime pieces of real estate in the path of progress. And then one day when I buy it for 10,000 an acre and someone comes and says, I'll give you 200,000 an acre, my grandkids will thank me.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. This is funny. It's something that, well, it's a tale as old as time. But when I first got into land, I was always fascinated because I'd be digging through property records in a county and I'd see, man, this one family or this one person owns like 30% of the county. How does this happen? And I'm sitting here and I'll send them an offer. And they were like, no, there's no chance I'm going to sell you this property at this, because that is what they were handed, right? They were handed this gift of this asset, which they know is going to steadily appreciate. There's no rush to sell it. The only reason they would sell it is if you're buying it at the right price point. And it also, there's this other beautiful fact where it allows you, if you're buying in a place you live, it's another reason that ties you to the community. Like land itself is different from, say, you have a bunch of gold somewhere, right? That gold doesn't have this, I don't know, this ability to tie you to a community. It's not serving the school system when you're paying your taxes. There's no sense of imagination. Like when I first few years I invested in land, I almost never went to properties until I started doing subdivisions and developments. And now when I go to a property, like we're doing a subdivision in Tennessee right now, and we went and visited the property like 3 or 4 weeks ago for the first time. And we walked out there and like there was this sense of like, I don't know, adventure, this sense of ability to create, to fashion something like, oh, we're going to take this giant space. This is where the road's going to come through. And then this parcel, and you go look at this parcel and it's right up on the ridge. And that's where you want to build your house. And you're like, this is fun. Like this was a really exciting and enticing thing whereas almost any other thing has so many downsides to it maybe a house is exciting to own. I agree. I like owning a house. I don't think I'd want to own a bunch of houses. That sounds like a headache. But as opposed to like gold or stocks, like it just does not have the same feeling attached to it. So there's like, from my perspective, I see obviously it's a safe asset. It's relatively easy to underwrite due diligence on in comparison to, a lot of other things. And you can still like there's so much of it. This is something that we haven't even really talked about. You compare it to homes or whatever else. There are so it's hard to fathom, right? When you start talking about square miles, millions of square miles of land that is available to be purchased for all different purposes, right? So yeah, I get really excited about it. And when I was asking you about what's the biggest loss you incurred, you're talking about lawsuits and all this sort of stuff. And that does happen in land occasionally. But for the most part, if you're just going to go buy rural acreage or, a home site or something, like the chances of any legal implications coming up, one, there's a lot of things that can be done to ensure that that doesn't happen. But if you're buying through a title company, I mean, what's the worst that can really happen when you purchase land? There's so many safe gaps, and what do you think? Where if you were to actually, here's the better question. This is what I wanted to get to today. If you've been flipping land, do you have a specific asset class that you are buying into? Is it kind of the rural properties? Is it commercial? What's the land that you like to buy?
So at this point, the core part of our business is still the rural recreational tracts.
Okay.
We are moving into more urban, suburban centric land investment. And that looks like buying and developing tracts, right? Developing tracts, re-entitling tracts, getting into larger subdivisions, which is really exciting. But at this point, the majority of our focus is on those rural tracts. I want to circle back in one of the things you were talking about with land and the benefits of land. So a lot of the reasons why people invest in real estate is because of the tax benefits. But the godfather of tax benefits of real estate is still available to land investors. So say you invest in a tract of land in a area that is growing, like we talked about land banking and the path of progress. The best tool that real estate investors have is not depreciation. It's not the rental write-outs. It's the 1031 exchange, the deferral of capital gains. And we can still use that tool if we purchase property in the right area. So if you want to build basically a savings account associated with dirt, right? You're looking at this dirt and you're saying that I know on average farmland is compounded. The compound annual growth rate of farmland is a little over 9%, a little over the stock market. And if I buy in a path of progress, that compound annual growth rate could be way higher than that. But when we come to the stock market, the volatility of the stock market is pretty crazy, right? And so there's a sequence of return risk, which means if I'm investing in a specific asset class or stocks in general, and I decide that I need to retire or I need this money in this specific time, the volatility of the stock market exposes us to a sequence of return risk, which could mean that my entire portfolio drops 30% on the eve that I'm planning on retiring. And so the drawdown of my capital, of my stocks over the period of time that I'm retiring, or this could come with gold too, or any other kind of more volatile asset class like that. Wow, that could be really bad, right? That could set me up to not be able to retire or to not be able to have that cash to pass my children. With land, it's really not like that. In historically, land is quite recession resistant. And even if you look back in the most exposed land asset class during 2008, there's not enough data that indicates that land infill prices dropped as dramatically as house prices, right? And so we can look at over time, we have a more recession resistant asset class, which is land. We have a less possibility of risk happening in terms of tenants, termites, toilets that happens with other real estate. We have the benefits of the compounding of this land, and we also have the ability to utilize the most potent real estate tax benefit, which is the 1031 exchange. So we see that all of these things, of course, I'm a land guy, right? And these are the reasons why. It's not built on I'm selling something or I'm doing something. I'm practicing what I'm preach. Logan's practicing what he preaches. But in reality, this is the ultimate asset class because it has all these benefits and the risk adjusted returns are better than anything you can get in the market.
Yeah, and on top of that, it's what I think is so funny is there's like this historical trend. It's like we're full cycling, right? So land used to be the thing you invested in, right? Buy dirt, you go get your 2 acres for your family or whatever. And then there was this whatever, I don't know what you really call it, this whole real estate investing, bigger pockets bubble where it's just like, all right, now do this. Like you said, single family homes, and then flip, and then buy foreclosures, and then burst strategy, and then on to, and everybody kind of followed all of these different trends. And I feel like the trend is coming all the way back to like just go buy dirt. It's safe. There's always benefit. Like most, even down to law, right? I had the land lawyer on my podcast a few weeks back, and he was talking about how almost all law around real estate is meant to protect rather to ensure that no real estate is going fallow or unused. And that comes all the way down to land. Like all of these different structures around why we're going to incentivize real estate investors is to take something that's unused and use it. And land is fundamentally that biggest thing, whether it's going from unused to farmed or unused to now it's a beautiful park or unused to now it's a mobile home park or unused and it's an RV park, whatever. Now, where I do think you still fall into issues, right, is it will never really be the passive cash flowing product for a lifetime, right? And this is something that like my wife and I were just talking about it today, right? We're like, okay, well, we can flip land until we die, or we can have this big pot of money, or we can give our kids a bunch of land, which is kind of what we're leaning towards. Or what do? If you make a bunch of money, I know land investors who are actually taking their land money and going back to buy single family rentals. So do you have that solution as far as long-term cash flowing assets go?
Yeah, I think that what happens is, we eventually try to find like the most tax efficient way to amplify and multiply our money. So I think that I will eventually get back into more commercial real estate, non-residential commercial. So I'm dealing with professional operations. So think about like a strip mall or think about like an industrial or a warehouse or something like that. That's just a lot less hands-on in terms of the management of tenants. And it's focused more on the management of the actual business. And so for me, that fits my focus. But to be honest with you, man, like I'm okay with paying taxes at this point because if I can compound my capital at 50% per year, or whatever, more or whatever it is, land investing is pretty profitable. But I have to take a big slice and give that to the government instead of having the headache of investing in a bunch of rental properties. That'll slow your growth in the long term. So we're building this asset, this asset that's valuable through our land investing. And I don't feel the need to take it out of my business. So I invest in some stuff on the sides. Like I'll put my money in savings accounts, right? I have my money in savings account and also life insurance. But I mean, other than that, I'm not really flirting with anything else at this point. I still have rental properties, but trying to get rid of those as quickly as possible. But that's the focus of taking my money, put it in the savings or life insurance, and then leveraging that to continue to buy more and more dirt and flip more and more dirt.
Yeah, and I think, I've been playing around with this for a while. I think the ultimate solution, I don't have the completed strategy around it. I actually did a podcast a few weeks back about land leasing, but I think some of the people who really figured it out are buying and maintaining ownership on land near big commercial intersections, right? So if you can find and maintain commercial property and then lease that as pad sites to Taco Bell and Starbucks
Yeah.
and whatever else, then you actually do have the ability to take land that you do nothing with, right? Somebody else is going to build on it and manage it and make sure it's kept. It's effectively like the best sort of triple net lease is a land lease to a big company like a fast food entity or something like that. So we actually got really close to doing a deal like this. We found, I can't remember, it was something like 20 acres commercial land right at a major intersection. And we were going to buy it and entitle it for, I think a section of it was multifamily, a section of it was going to be for self-storage, and then a section of it was just going to be commercial nearest the road. And my whole goal was, okay, I'm going to entitle this property, chop it up, sell it off. And the only thing that I'm going to maintain is not necessarily cash profits, but I'm going to carve off 2 or 3 of these pad sites that I can put a Taco Bell on, a KFC on, whatever. And if I can get something like that, I mean, those companies will sign 25, 50-year leases. I've heard of 99-year leases. So I think that's the closest thing you're going to get in land, other than like it go really full cycle. And that's like, all right, we're going back to cattle, right? Like we're just going to run a ton of cattle on this and we're going to go back to ranching and then it produces for you forever because you turn that piece of land into a business, which I don't know. I get more interested in that every day. I guess the older I get, the less I want to be in the city. I'm like, maybe some ranching sounds good these days. I don't know.
Yeah, man, I understand. And I know a family that did that. They got a piece of dirt close to an airport in the city that I live in, and they put a massive gas station, a Wendy's, a Taco Bell, a strip mall, and a hotel. And they have that piece of land and they absolutely murder.
Yeah.
They murder. And
Yeah.
they don't have to do anything. They own it and they ground lease it to the developer who developed the strip mall, the developer who developed the hotel, the developer who developed the gas station and the Wendy's and the Taco Bell. And
Yeah.
I mean that you're right. That is a good way to get into it. But a lot of times, what ends up happening is for those types of deals, there's a lot of cash outlay. A lot of cash outlay. And
Yeah.
so if you want to control them, you're going to need to control them with investors. And then a lot of times investors are not interested in long-term holds, right? Because they want to get a good IRR on their money. They don't want to just hold in cash flow. And so it becomes more complicated for people that are not from the Silver Spoon Club to get
Yeah.
those types of properties. But again, you can reduce your basis by selling off portions of it. There's a lot of different ways to do it. But I definitely would be interested in that as well.
Well, we'll have to brainstorm that off camera one of these times. But, well, I think we're getting close to the end here. Clay, you've been super great, man. It was great learning about you, but I believe you have some stuff that you want to announce to talk about. So, what do you got going on that maybe some of my listeners could take advantage of?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I very active on social media, right? And so I talk about land investing, land flipping on Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn. Everything is Clay Hepler or land-man.io is my website. If you're interested in learning a little bit more about land investing or maybe starting a land investing business, I do have a program that helps people get involved in this stuff. And you can fill out an application on my website. We are launching relatively soon. It's not out officially yet, but we are launching soon. But that's application only. And they're just kind of only people that are really, really interested in doing that. We'll take 4 to 6 people a month for that. So if you're interested, you could fill that out. But if not, I post a bunch of free content like Logan does on all my social medias, and you can follow me there.
Yeah. And so you're not doing like the standard land course or something like that. You're taking a small group and you're really guiding them through setting up a business, right?
Yeah, so it's going to be more high touch, a little bit more of a premium type of group. It's not a factory. I'm not trying to create a factory. I'm trying to do 4 to 6 people per month that are really genuinely interested in building 6, 7-figure businesses instead of trying to shotgun and have 20, 30 people a month and only 50% of them succeed or 40% of them succeed.
We're talking, that's being very gracious. Every once in a while, I'll do, I'm actually about to do it again. I'll go through and I'll post in all the Facebook groups and I'll be like, hey, I'll do 15-minute phone calls with any land investor who needs help with anything to the best of my ability, just for free. I'm not selling you nothing, just, and dude, my phone will light up and I'll talk to, last time I did it, I talked to 45 people in 15 days or something like that. And most of the calls that were supposed to be 15 minutes bled into like 20, 25, 30-minute calls. And it all came down to the same thing. It was people that paid 10, 20, 30, 40, $50,000 to some guru with coaching, and they're going to hold your hand and you get their CRM and all this sort of stuff. And they're literally, they make 2 or 3 bad land purchases and all of a sudden they're into it like 50, 60 grand and they're out of capital. They're like, I can't buy anything. The properties I bought aren't selling. What the hell do I do? I even got so far as like, I wanted to help these, like, okay, I'll buy this one wholesale. I might be able to make a little bit of money here. I was like trying to bail people out, but yeah, I still think you can add a lot of value to somebody's life with a sort of small group. I'll do 1 or 2 students at a time and walk them through coaching. Like you can really change someone's life. But as soon as you try to like create a coaching program that's universal and you can teach 100 people at a time, you necessarily have to remove all of the super useful details. because like, how are you going to sit and tell someone about, all right, this is how you set up a team in Texas while you're operating in Chicago, or what, it just gets so detailed that you have to have someone who's one actually done it and still does it regularly, which isn't most coaches right now.
I know. Yeah.
Or two, like you have to have someone who's really going to be able to spend time with you. And if you go above a certain number, it's just not feasible. I mean, two students for me is overwhelming, because I
Well,
need to
so
give them a lot of time.
and also like, to be fair, most people say they want to get into a business and they're not committed.
Yeah.
And so there's a reason why there's an application process. Because I don't want to take someone that like, people have reached out to me and say, "Hey, I have like $10,000." I'm like, that's not going to cut it.
Mhm.
Right? You can't market and build a business on $10,000. There are business building gurus that charge $25,000 and you got to put $120,000 down to buy a business, right? And you expect to get involved in land investing. And the picture that has been painted is this is easy. No, it's less competitive than wholesaling. It's a better business to scale than wholesaling and house flipping, which is the most comparable thing in real estate. But I mean, there are so many people that make false promises. And so the reason why there's an application process, and we even look at, we have X amount of applications, we will to maybe 25 to 30% at this point. And I say that is not a lot of data, but like most people just don't have the capital, the commitment to do it. And I'm not going to spend my time working with someone who's not committed.
Yeah. That's the
Because it
biggest
ruins
drain.
your reputation. It ruins your reputation. And I want people who are legitimately interested. And I don't need to like you, I don't need to do this. Like there's a bigger business opportunity here for me, which is why I'm doing it. Like I'm not doing it, obviously I'm doing it for the capital. Like I'm not saying this is the goodness of my heart. Like I'm doing it. There's an opportunity here for me to produce more revenue in my life, but I don't want to produce revenue like I'm buying an additional house. A house can produce revenue, right? But I'd rather focus on flipping land.
Mhm.
It's the same exact thing here. So someone that's super committed I can help them really scale their business, but I'm not going to take someone off the street like I'm buying another house just to get a little bit of extra money. It's just not worth it.
Yeah. Well, cool, Clay. We'll leave it at that. I appreciate it, folks. Thank you for listening to the Land Fixer podcast. As usual, check out primelandexchange.com. Check out if you need funding, go to landpartnerfunding.com. And if you need to get in contact with me, maybe you have property you want to partner on, you want to learn a little bit more about land, whatever it is, if it's related to land, I want to hear about it. Reach out to me, thelandfixer@gmail.com. And folks, I love you. We'll see you next time.